Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Finding Avalon Tantalizing Tidbits. This week we're doing part 4 of our cruising tip series, and we're going to cover leaving the Med and the Atlantic crossing. So we're going to start this from the Gibraltar Strait, and the Atlantic crossing kind of needs to be broken up into 3 separate parts, just in the way you think about it and prepare for it. The first is that you're actually leaving the Med. You're sort of leaving that little safe haven that you've been used to for the last season or however long you've been there. And things are going to get a little more remote, a little more wild. You're going out into the big Atlantic Ocean. And if you're then also crossing, that is its own separate beast. And then what happens post-Atlantic crossing as to where you are and how you can prepare in the Med for being in the Caribbean. Now, I know this is probably a lot to think about when you're really focused on that big ocean passage across the Atlantic, but do your best to grasp it, do your best to just see where this fits into your schedule and your planning. So the first part of this is that you're actually leaving the Mediterranean. So we're going to go from the Gibraltar Strait and how you might want to be prepared to go out on the first proper ocean crossing down to probably like the Canary Islands, which is going to be a logical launch pad to then commit to the Atlantic crossing. So let's talk about preparing to leave the Med. As we covered in our last episode, in terms of boat work, we found the south of Spain a really great last stop to prepare the boat, get all that boat work you need done, to get all your systems down pat. We replaced our rigging, we installed salt water pumps, we did a real lot in the south of Spain. It was also a really great spot to start a bit of a dry provision. And so think about all the dry goods. Think about cans, cereals, rices, pastas, all of that is a really good opportunity to start doing that in the south of Spain and through to Gibraltar. Don't get me wrong, the Canary Islands was great for provisioning, a little more expensive, but we did find there was a better selection in the south of Spain. But check out our previous episode for more details on that. So, leaving the Med, now is the best time to also be stocking up on parts for the boat. Think about all the spare parts, all the things you need for just your general maintenance. Think about oil changes, fan belts, fuel filters, water filters, if you've got water makers, what the filters you need for that, spare rigging, shackles, nylon washers, things for autopilots, all your electronics. Think about all those spare parts, because it is easier to get them now than it is once you're out of the Med. And it'll also be a lot cheaper. Also, think about it this way. Once you leave the Med, you're going to be embarking on about 4,000 miles of sailing before you reach the Caribbean. That's a lot of wear and tear. That's a lot of time. It's a lot of distance. So think about what you use on your boat, what wears out, what are the things you need to cover that kind of distance. For us, I really wish we'd planned for more like 6 months. In my mind, I was only able to get myself to the Caribbean, and I found it really hard to plan further than that. And this is one tip that I really want to give to you guys. Try your best to think further ahead, because I was there at the store with all the fuel filters, and I should have just bought 10 of them. Instead, I bought like 3 to get me across the Atlantic and 1 oil change when I'm in the Caribbean. And don't get me wrong, stuff is there, it's just harder to find. So take the opportunity now while it's cheap and available just to get it done. Now, you're most likely going to stop in Gibraltar to wait for a weather window to go through the strait. It's also a great point to stop for cheap fuel. So plan to fill up here because it's tax-free, and I think we were buying it for almost like 80 cents a litre, which was pretty good. We also chose to stop in La Linea. The reason for that was the marina was just much cheaper. We could still walk into Gibraltar by foot, take the bus, super easy. You can still take the boat in to get fuel, but we found it a little cheaper to stay there in La Linea and a little easier. Also means you don't have to do the whole check-in process with Gibraltar, because I'm guessing you're going to be going from Schengen to Schengen, or at least Euro to Euro, so it was a little bit easier. But if you are getting low on Schengen days, it is maybe a good chance to be checked out of Schengen and get into Gibraltar, which is a bit more of a safe haven. In terms of the strait itself, there's some really good documentation out there. Check out Noon's site and the pilot guides as well. They show you all really great little graphs and charts on the different tides. But generally speaking, if you're traveling west, you want to be waiting for an easterly breeze and an outgoing tide. Leaving from La Linea, we had to give ourselves like 2 hours. to leave and make our way out of the strait. And trust me, there is a real acceleration zone in there. We left in probably 5 knots, and by halfway through that strait, we're in a good 25 knots of breeze, which hung around for a good probably 3 miles out of the strait. There's also a lot of traffic out there, a lot of big container ships, so just keep your eyes about and make sure when you cross the channel, you sort of do it at 90 degrees and get across there quickly so you're not interfering with the big container ships. Now, you've probably got about 500 miles between Gibraltar and the Canary Islands. And the decision you've got to make is like, are you going to do that in one hit or are you going to stop along the way in Morocco? We chose to stop in Morocco and we absolutely loved it, but I would recommend taking some distance offshore. The reason is because there's a lot of fishing boats out there, and we found ourselves getting tangled up in fishing lines about 3 times. Also, just from safety, we did hear a few reports of people sort of getting approached by fishing boats. So if you can, hang out a good like 60, 100 miles offshore before you start making that turn down to Canaries. But this crossing is a perfect crossing to start testing your systems. Start getting your head around how you're going to sail that boat for the Atlantic crossing, how you're going to do your watch systems, meal systems, how you're going to manage your power, how you're going to manage using sat phones, all that kind of stuff. Think about this crossing as your lead up and your test passage into the Atlantic crossing. Think about, your water consumption, your food consumption, gas consumption, fuel consumption. Think about all that. Start making note on how long you actually need to run that engine for, how much water you're actually using. Because once you get to the Canaries, that's the time to then maybe rethink those systems, get some additional supplies, and just get it perfect. It's also a really good opportunity to work out your safety procedures. How are you going to be clipping on? I mean, you should already be doing this for night passages and stuff, but you're out in the ocean now. What are your procedures? How are you going to be clipping on with tethers? How are you going to be doing that with multiple crew members? How are you going to be using that sat phone? How are you going to be downloading the weather? Are you going to be checking in with shore parties? How are you going to be doing that? Start getting in the rhythm and see what actually works for you. Now, you need to do a little bit of planning if you are going to stop at Morocco. There are only 4 ports, 3 to 4 ports from memory that you can stop at. We decided to stop at Agadir. It was a great little marina and a great launch pad then to the Canaries. It still gave us a good sort of 450 miles from memory to test out the kinks in the boat, to sort of get our things down pat and really understand our systems. But Morocco itself was an absolute gold mine of just traveling and culture, so I really recommend stopping there if you can. Finally, if possible, try and spend some good amount of time in the Canaries. It's probably one of our regrets that we could have done a season just in the Canary Islands. So if you are planning on leaving the Med and you've done a few seasons in the Med, I'd really recommend trying to leave early and get down there, explore Morocco to the best of your ability, and then spend a good few months in the Canary Islands exploring. And also, if you've got some kinks to iron out in the boat, it gives you the time to do it. If I had our time over again, and if we were to do this again, that's what I would do. I would be either wintering with the boat in the Mediterranean, getting all the things done that we need to, or I'd come back early in that season, early in summer, leave through Gibraltar and get down to the Canaries and be able to spend the summer down the Canaries from, say, like August through to November. Guys, I really hope you enjoyed part 1 of leaving the Mediterranean. Part 2 will be talking about preparing for the Atlantic crossing and the best places to do that in regards to the Canary Islands, and what kind of mindset to be in for preparing for a crossing like that. Remember, as always, give us a big thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you consider becoming a patron and supporting the journey, we'd really appreciate it. There'll be plenty more of these cruising tips coming up. And so yeah, look out for them. We'll be going all the way through the Caribbean, to Panama, to the Galapagos, and to the South Pacific. So I really hope it's valuable information. And make sure you comment below to let me know what you like, what you don't like, and possibly add some other tips for some other cruisers out there. Until then, bye guys.